"Mom, don't come today. The party is just for the kids' friends. You don't get that stuff anymore." The words from my son, Jacob, pierced my chest like icy daggers, cutting through years of sacrifice and unconditional love. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Carol Miller. I'm 68 years old, and for my entire life, I have been the grandmother who was always there. That Saturday morning in Queens, I woke up at 6, as always, prepared my coffee, light and sweet, in the same chipped mug I've used for 20 years, and sat in front of my bedroom mirror to get ready. I had spent hours the night before choosing a simple but elegant navy blue dress, the one I saved for special occasions. I carefully styled my hair, gathering my graying strands into a low bun that made me feel dignified, presentable. The gift for my granddaughter Claire rested on the dining table, a porcelain doll I'd seen in the window of a boutique on Madison Avenue. It cost more than I could afford on my Social Security check, but Claire had mentioned wanting a doll like the princesses have, and I, as always, couldn't resist fulfilling her wishes. I wrapped the gift in gold paper with a pink ribbon I found at the bottom of a drawer, leftovers from past birthdays where I was still welcome. I took the subway from the Ditmars Boulevard station, the same route I'd taken hundreds of times to visit my son and his family in their Upper East Side apartment. During the 20-minute ride, my heart pounded with excitement mixed with something I didn't dare to name: anxiety. The last few months had been different. The phone calls had become less frequent, the visits colder, the conversations shorter. But I told myself it was just my imagination, that the exhaustion of raising young children had my daughter-in-law, Tiffany, more on edge than usual. I arrived at the Doorman building on Park Avenue at exactly 5 in the afternoon, as they had told me. I walked up to the 5th floor because the elevator was out of order, feeling my knees protest with every step. The weight of the gift and my purse seemed to multiply with each floor, but the thought of hugging Claire on her 10th birthday gave me strength. I rang the doorbell, my knuckles trembling with emotion. I had rehearsed the surprise I would give Claire, memorized the birthday song we would sing together. But when the door opened, it wasn't my granddaughter's radiant smile that I found. Tiffany appeared in the doorway, wearing a chic black dress that highlighted her slender figure. Her makeup was flawless, her blonde hair falling in carefully styled waves over her shoulders. She looked me up and down with those green eyes that I had once found beautiful, but which now pierced me with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. "You're here again?" she murmured in a tone dripping with disdain. "We don't want the kids to feel uncomfortable with you here. It's better if you just go home." Behind her, I could glimpse the living room decorated with pastel balloons, a table piled high with brightly wrapped gifts, and the sound of children's laughter reaching me like an echo from a world from which I had just been expelled. I caught a glimpse of Claire for a moment, in her new pink dress, surrounded by children her age. My granddaughter saw me and raised her hand to wave, but Tiffany slammed the door shut. The sound echoed in the hallway like a slap across the face. I stood there, planted in front of the closed door, clutching the gift to my chest as if it were my own heart about to break. Tears began to blur my vision as the echo of laughter faded behind the polished wood. I walked back toward the elevator on trembling legs. I felt the eyes of neighbors coming and going. Some knew me from the years when I was a regular visitor, when my steps in these halls were met with smiles and friendly greetings. Now their gazes weighed on me like silent judgments. There goes the rejected grandma. Poor woman. Even her own family doesn't want her. On the subway ride back home, I hugged the unopened doll as if it were a baby. An elderly woman sitting across from me asked if I was all right, but I could only shake my head and stare out the window at the dark tunnels that seemed to reflect the emptiness beginning to grow in my chest. That was the first exclusion. The first of 12 times my own family would shut the door in my face. The first time I understood that a mother's and grandmother's love was not enough to guarantee respect and value. The first crack in the heart I had given unconditionally for decades. I arrived at my small apartment in Astoria as the sun began to set behind the New York City skyline. I left the gift on the kitchen table and made myself some chamomile tea, trying to calm the tremor that had started in my hands, and was spreading through my entire body. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one I inherited from my mother, and looked at the photographs hanging on the living room wall. Jacob as a little boy riding his bike, Claire taking her first steps, the family gathered at Christmases past. At that moment, I didn't know that this first humiliation was just the rehearsal for a symphony of contempt that awaited me. I didn't know that my own blood had decided to erase me, that my existence had become an inconvenience to their perfect lives and their elegant parties. I didn't know that I would have to learn to close off my own heart to protect myself from more pain. That night, as Claire's unopened doll sat on the kitchen table, I understood for the first time that love can be unrequited, and that sometimes the ones we love the most are the ones who can hurt us the most. The second exclusion came just 3 weeks later at the baptism of my youngest grandson, Alex. This time, there wasn't even a phone call. I found out by chance when my neighbor from 3B, Mrs. Gable, mentioned in the elevator that she'd seen the pictures on Tiffany's Facebook page. "The baby looked so precious in his little white suit," she said with an innocent smile, not knowing she had just plunged another dagger into my heart. I rushed to my old computer, the one Jacob had given me years ago, saying I needed to get with the times. With trembling hands, I navigated to Tiffany's page, and there they were. Dozens of photos of my grandson's baptism. St. Jean-Baptiste Church, the same one where I had baptized Jacob 42 years ago, filled with smiling guests. The godparents, distant cousins who barely knew the child, Tiffany's co-workers in their expensive suits. Even the building's doorman was there, holding a glass of champagne. Everyone but me. The grandmother who had spent sleepless nights when Jacob had a fever as a baby, who had saved penny by penny for his first communion suit, who had cried with pride on his college graduation day. I, who had been the first to hold each of my grandchildren when they were born, was not worthy of being present at the baptism of the youngest. I stayed up until 3 a.m. looking at those photos, zooming in on each one, searching for any trace of sadness in my family's faces, any sign that they had missed me. But all I saw were radiant smiles, as if my absence had been planned, as if the party was more perfect without me. That same week, I decided to cook the pot roast that Jacob loved so much as a child. I'd slow-cooked it all morning with carrots and potatoes, the scent of thyme and rosemary filling my small kitchen, reminding me of how he used to sit in a high chair to watch me cook, his bright eyes following my every move. "Mom, when will it be ready?" he'd ask every 5 minutes, and I'd give him a taste of the broth with a wooden spoon. I packed the pot roast in glass containers, the same ones I had used for years to bring them homemade food. I took the subway to their apartment, climbed those 5 flights of stairs that were getting harder each time, and rang the bell, hoping the familiar aroma would soften their hearts. Tiffany opened the door wearing an expensive silk robe, her hair perfectly coiffed despite it being midday. She glanced at the containers in my hands and sighed with annoyance. "Carol, we've told you not to come by unannounced. The children are busy with their private English and French tutors. Jacob is working from home and can't be disturbed. Besides, we already have food." Over her shoulder, I saw boxes of Chinese takeout on the dining room table. They had preferred to order in rather than eat the meal I had prepared with so much love, the same pot roast Jacob had asked me to teach him how to make when he got married, promising he would make it for his children so they wouldn't lose the family traditions. "But it's Sunday," I managed to murmur, feeling my voice crack. "We always used to eat together on Sundays." "Times change, Carol. We're not the traditional family you remember. We have our own plans." The door closed again, and I was left in the hallway with my containers of food, the smell of the roast mixing with the building's disinfectant and my own humiliation. I went home and ate alone at my small table, watching the news on TV so I wouldn't have to listen to the silence. Every spoonful of the pot roast tasted of memories that no longer mattered, of traditions that had died without a farewell. The third exclusion was at Christmas. I had started preparing Christmas dinner at the beginning of December, as I always did. I bought the biggest turkey I could find at Gristati's, almonds for the homemade sugar cookies I made following my mother's recipe, and even took out the lace tablecloth I only used on special occasions. The table was set for 6: Jacob, Tiffany, the 3 children, and me. I waited until 10 at night. The turkey dried out in the oven, the potatoes grew cold, the candles melted completely. No one came. No one called to apologize or offer an explanation. At 11:30, when I had lost all hope, I received a text message from Jacob. "Mom, we decided to spend Christmas at Tiffany's parents' place in Greenwich. It's just easier for the kids. Merry Christmas." I sat alone in front of the TV, eating cold turkey leftovers while watching the broadcast of Midnight Mass from St. Patrick's Cathedral. On the screen, entire families took communion together. Children dressed as shepherds sang carols. Elderly couples held hands during prayers. I was there, in my good black dress that I had saved for the occasion, my shoes pinching my feet but making me feel elegant, completely alone in my apartment that smelled of a wasted Christmas dinner. The next day, scrolling through social media, I saw them. Photos of the perfect Christmas at the sprawling Greenwich estate of Tiffany's parents. A long table with an immaculate white tablecloth, crystal glasses, professional decorations that looked like they were out of a magazine. The children opening expensive gifts, Jacob toasting with French champagne, Tiffany glowing in a red dress that cost more than my Social Security check for 3 months. And there was the wealthy mother-in-law, embracing my grandchildren as if they were her own, occupying the place that for years had been mine. She, who had appeared in their lives when everything was already settled, who had never changed a diaper or spent a sleepless night with a feverish child, was now the favorite grandmother because she could take them skiing in Switzerland and buy them designer toys. But what hurt the most was one particular photograph, Claire, my beloved granddaughter, sitting on the other grandmother's lap, smiling at her with the same tenderness she used to reserve for me. The same little girl who used to ask me to tell her made-up stories before bed, who drew me hearts on paper napkins, who would tell me, "I love you to the moon and back, Grandma," every time I left her house. That night, I cried until I had no tears left. It wasn't just the rejection that was destroying me, but the ease with which they seemed to have replaced me. As if my 48 years of motherhood and 8 years as a grandmother were so insignificant they could be erased without consequence. I got out of bed, went to the kitchen, and took out a bottle of brandy I'd kept since my husband's death. I poured a glass, toasted alone to the forgotten grandmothers, and drank it in one gulp, feeling the alcohol burn my throat almost as much as their indifference burned my soul. At that moment, sitting in my armchair with the empty glass trembling in my hands, I began to understand that it hadn't been a misunderstanding, nor a series of unfortunate coincidences. It had been a deliberate, calculated, systematic decision. My family had decided to erase me from their lives, and I, fool that I was, kept hoping they would change their minds. The fourth exclusion came disguised as illness. One March morning, I woke up with a high fever and a chest pain that made it hard to breathe. My primary care physician, Dr. Evans, diagnosed me with pneumonia and warned me that at my age, it wasn't something to take lightly. He prescribed antibiotics and complete rest, but above all, he told me I would need help with basic tasks for at least a week. With hands trembling from the fever, I dialed Jacob's number. He took so long to answer that I thought he wouldn't. But finally his voice came on the line, distant and busy. "What is it, Mom? I'm in an important meeting. Jacob, I'm sick. The doctor says I have pneumonia and I need—" "Mom, I can't talk right now. Tiffany and I have a work dinner tonight. The kids have extracurriculars all week. I'm sure it's not that serious. You always exaggerate these things." The line went dead. I sat there on the edge of my bed, holding the phone as if it were my last link to the world. For the next 5 days, no one came to see me. No one asked how I was. Mrs. Gable, who found out by chance when she saw me shuffling down the hall, was the one who brought me soup from the pharmacy and made sure I took my pills. "And your son?" she asked with genuine concern as she helped me change my sweat-soaked sheets. "He's very busy," I lied, protecting Jacob even in my most absolute abandonment. The 5th rejection happened in May, on my 69th birthday. I woke up early, as I always did on special days, with that childlike anticipation I had never lost. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe they would remember it was the day I came into the world, the day that changed their lives forever. I made my favorite breakfast. pancakes with real maple syrup, coffee in my special mug. I put on my sky blue blouse, the one Jacob had given me the year before when we were still pretending to be a united family. I put on a little makeup and the pearl earrings I had inherited from my mother. I waited, all morning, all afternoon, all night. The phone didn't ring once. No text message, no call, not even one of those automatic Facebook birthday wishes. It was as if I had ceased to exist for them, as if my birth date had been erased from their calendars. At 11 at night, when I had lost all hope, I allowed myself to look at their social media. A mistake. Tiffany had posted photos of a dinner at Tavern on the Green, the same restaurant where we had celebrated my last 3 birthdays when I was still welcome. They were all there, smiling, toasting with red wine, the children eating fancy meals. The caption read, "Perfect family dinner. Blessed Chalk family. Perfect family. Without me." That night I took a sleeping pill I had saved from my post-widowhood insomnia. I needed to disconnect from reality, at least for a few hours, because the pain had become physical, as if a vital organ had been torn out without anesthesia. The 6th exclusion was my grandson Alex's first Holy Communion. This time, I didn't even find out through social media. Sal from the local deli told me. He had seen the whole family leaving St. John Baptist Church dressed in their Sunday best. "The boy looked so handsome in his white suit," he said, as he wrapped the piece of chicken I could barely afford. "But I didn't see you there, Carol. Were you feeling under the weather?" I forced a smile and nodded. "Yes, I had a bit of a flu," I lied, carrying the humiliation that even the neighborhood shopkeepers noticed my absence from my grandchildren's important moments. That afternoon, I went to St. Jean Baptiste. I sat in a pew at the back and looked at the altar where, hours before, my grandson had received his first communion without me. I prayed, or at least I tried, asking God what I had done wrong to deserve this punishment. The votive candles flickered like my hopes, faint and about to be extinguished. As I left the church, I ran into Father Michael, who had known me for years from when I was a regular parishioner. He greeted me warmly and asked how my grandchildren were. I had to explain, my voice breaking, that I'd had a prior engagement and couldn't attend the communion. "That's strange," he said with the wisdom that comes from years of hearing confessions. "Children need their grandparents at these important moments. They're the ones who pass on the faith from generation to generation." His words were like salt in an open wound. I, who had raised Jacob in the Catholic faith, who had taken him to Mass every Sunday of his childhood, who had taught him the Our Father and the Hail Mary, had been excluded from the most sacred moment in my grandson's religious life. I walked home, my feet aching and my soul aching even more. In the mailbox, I found a utility bill and a flyer. Nothing else. Not a souvenir photo from the communion, not a belated invitation, not even an explanation. That night, as I heated a can of soup in the kitchen, I saw my reflection in the dark window. It was the face of a defeated woman, with deep dark circles and wrinkles that seemed to have multiplied in recent months. I wondered if this was the old age that awaited me, becoming a shadow of myself, a burden my own children preferred to avoid. But something inside me, something small and stubborn, refused to give up completely. It was the same strength that had kept me going when I was widowed, that had given me the courage to raise Jacob alone, that had made me get up every morning for 40 years to go clean offices and support my family. I poured the soup into my favorite bowl, turned on the television, and promised myself I would not let myself die while I was still alive. Not yet. Although I didn't know how, although I had no idea where to start, I had to find a way to reclaim my dignity, to show them that Carol Miller was worth more than the contempt they offered me. 3 months after promising myself I wouldn't let myself die, the news that would change everything arrived. It was a Tuesday morning when the phone rang with the insistence of bad news. On the other end of the line, the voice of my brother Lewis's lawyer sounded formal and distant, as if reading from a prepared script. "Mrs. Miller, I'm sorry to inform you that your brother, Lewis, passed away last night at his home in the Hudson Valley. A massive heart attack. He didn't suffer. I have specific instructions to contact you for the reading of his will. Lewis, my older brother, who had left New York City 15 years ago after his divorce. seeking the peace of the countryside. We had maintained a distant but affectionate relationship. Birthday calls, Christmas cards, the occasional visit. I never thought he would include me in his will, let alone in the way I was about to discover. The lawyer scheduled a meeting at his office on Friday. I arrived nervous, dressed in my only formal black suit, expecting perhaps a small inheritance that would help with monthly expenses. What I heard left me breathless. As stated in the last will and testament of Mr. Louis Miller, he leaves to you the entirety of his property located in the Hudson Valley. A stately 18th-century manor home with 7 acres of adjoining land, fully restored and with no mortgage. I was speechless. The lawyer continued reading in that monotone voice of someone who has seen too many testamentary surprises to get excited about any of them. Furthermore, he bequeaths to you the sum of $500,000 in cash, deposited in a checking account at Bank of America, as well as a 2018 Mercedes-Benz. $500,000. A manor home, a luxury car. Suddenly, the poor grandma, who had been systematically despised, had become the owner of a considerable estate. The following Saturday, I took the train up to the Hudson Valley to see my inheritance. The taxi dropped me in front of a wrought iron gate that opened onto a gravel driveway lined with ancient oak trees. The house rose at the end like a fairy tale palace, with its golden stone walls, black iron balconies, and a slate roof that shimmered under the June sun. Inside, every room was a surprise. Louis had invested years and a considerable fortune in restoring the property, respecting its original architecture while adding all modern comforts. Marble floors, ceilings with exposed wooden beams, working fireplaces, a kitchen equipped with state-of-the-art appliances, 4 bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms, and a library with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. The gardens. 7 acres of English lawn, rose bushes, fruit trees, and a small vegetable patch that Louis had tended to personally. There was even a rectangular swimming pool with blue tiles that reflected the sky like a crystal-clear mirror. I sat on one of the marble benches in the garden and cried, not from sadness, but from a strange mixture of relief, disbelief, and something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. For the first time since the exclusions began, I had something that no one could take away from me. A place in the world that was mine by right. That night I slept in the master bedroom, between Egyptian cotton sheets that smelled of lavender. It was the first time in months I had been able to sleep without pills, lulled by the silence of the countryside and the feeling of being protected by walls that now belonged to me. On Monday morning, my cell phone started ringing insistently. Jacob had found out about my inheritance. I don't know how he learned so quickly. Probably through a mutual acquaintance or by checking public records. His voice on the phone had completely changed. From the dismissive coldness I had grown accustomed to, it had shifted to an artificial warmth that failed to hide his true intentions. "Mom, why didn't you tell me about Uncle Louis? We're all so worried about you. It must be very difficult to manage such a large inheritance at your age." At my age. As if being 69 incapacitated me from making decisions about my own life. "Tiffany and I have been talking," he continued in that syrupy voice he hadn't used with me in years, "and we think it would be best if you came to live with us. We could help you sell the house in the Hudson Valley and manage the money responsibly. The kids miss you so much." The kids missed me. The same Tiffany who had called me a meddling old woman now suddenly discovered that her children needed their grandmother. "That's not necessary, Jacob. I am perfectly capable of managing my own affairs," I replied with a calmness that surprised me. "But Mom, it's a lot of money, and that huge house. What are you going to do all alone in the middle of nowhere? Think about it. We're your family." Family. The word they had emptied of meaning with months of slights and exclusions, they now used as a magic key to access my inheritance. "I have thought about it, son. I'm staying here." I hung up the phone feeling a strange satisfaction. For the first time in my adult life, I had made a major decision without consulting anyone, without asking for permission, without seeking approval. It was my house, my money, my life. But Jacob didn't give up easily. The following days were a systematic campaign of calls, text messages, and even unannounced visits. Tiffany showed up one Wednesday afternoon, dressed in expensive clothes, but with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Carol, darling, she said, walking into my living room as if she had every right to. What a beautiful house. Louis had such good taste. She looked around, evaluating every object, every piece of furniture, mentally calculating its value. Though it's much too big for one person, and so isolated. Aren't you afraid at night? Afraid of what? I asked, pouring tea into the porcelain cups Louis had collected. Well, you know, break-ins, accidents. At your age, you never know. It would be terrible if something happened to you here, so far away from us. Her words sounded like a veiled threat, as if my well-being depended on my generosity towards them. But I was no longer the same woman who had cried alone in her Astoria apartment. The dignity I had begun to reclaim gave me a strength I didn't know I possessed. Tiffany, I've lived alone for 10 years since I was widowed. I think I can take care of myself just fine. She left that same afternoon, but not before discreetly taking pictures of the main rooms, probably to show them to Jacob, to calculate how much money my new situation represented. The weekend family visits began. Jacob would bring the children, but it was clear it was a strategic decision rather than an emotional one. The little ones would run through the gardens while he and Tiffany assessed every corner of the property with greedy eyes. "Mom, this house is too much for you," Jacob insisted every time he came. "You could sell it and buy a nice apartment in the city, close to us. That way you'd have company and enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life." The rest of my life, as if it were a death sentence to be managed efficiently. One afternoon, as Claire played with me in the garden, telling me stories about school like in the old days, I heard her ask her father, "Daddy, why do we visit Grandma every weekend now? You used to say she was a pain." Jacob's response was a murmur I couldn't fully hear, but the word inheritance reached my ears clearly. My 10-year-old granddaughter had understood what had taken me months to accept, that my value to my family was directly proportional to my bank account. Over the next few weeks, I decided to do something I had never done in my life: live for myself. For the first time since I got married at 21, since I became a mother at 23, since I was widowed at 59, I didn't have to answer to anyone about my decisions, my expenses, my time. I started by updating my wardrobe. I went to the shops in town and bought clothes that I liked, not what was age-appropriate, according to the standards I had always followed. A red dress that flattered my figure, comfortable yet elegant shoes, a wool coat that made me feel sophisticated. For the first time in decades, when I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who deserved respect. I hired Maria, a 50-year-old woman from the next town over, to help me with the cleaning and maintenance of the house, not because I couldn't do it myself, but because I wanted to spend my time on things that truly mattered to me. Maria turned out to be more than an employee. She became my first genuine friend in years. "Mrs. Miller," she would say as we made homemade jam from the fruit in the orchard, "you don't seem like a 69-year-old woman. You have more vitality than my 40-year-old daughter." It was true. I felt younger, more alive, more myself than I had in the last 10 years, as if I had been living the life others expected of me and had finally found my own path. On weekends, when Jacob and Tiffany came with the children, I had learned to observe without getting emotionally involved. It was like watching a play where you knew all the lines beforehand. Tiffany would walk through the house making seemingly innocent comments. "Carol, this china is lovely. Is it authentic Wedgwood? It must be worth a fortune." Or, "What a shame this antique furniture requires so much upkeep. It would be impossible to take care of it properly in the city." Jacob was less subtle. He would directly suggest smart investments for my money, like buying a condo in the city that he had seen and that would be perfect for me. Coincidentally, it was in the same building where they lived, a smaller unit that I could comfortably afford if I sold the Hudson Valley house. One September afternoon, while Claire and I were picking tomatoes in the garden, she asked me with the brutal frankness of a child, "Grandma, why do Mommy and Daddy talk so much about your money when they think we're not listening?" I froze, a ripe tomato in my hand, searching for an answer that wouldn't destroy my granddaughter's innocence but also wasn't a lie. Sometimes grown-ups worry about things they shouldn't, honey. Like when Mommy told Daddy you need to sign some papers before you forget everything. Before I forget everything. Tiffany was suggesting I was losing my mental faculties, preparing the ground for something I didn't even dare to imagine. It was the perfect strategy. If they could make people believe I had memory problems or dementia, they could justify making decisions for me, for my own good. That same night, I called my doctor in the city and asked for an urgent appointment. I wanted a full medical report confirming my complete mental capacity. Dr. Evans, who had known me for 15 years, was surprised by my request. "Carol, you are perfectly lucid. Your memory is better than that of many 50-year-olds. Why do you need a medical certificate?" I vaguely explained my family situation without going into humiliating details. He nodded with the understanding of someone who had seen too many families destroyed by inheritances and money. "I'll run every neurological test you want, but let me give you some advice. Protect your interest legally. I've seen too many elderly patients lose their assets by trusting well-intentioned relatives." Well-intentioned. A word I could no longer apply to my son and daughter-in-law. The following Monday, I hired the most prestigious law firm in the area. The lawyer, Ms. Isabel Warren, was a serious woman in her 50s who listened to my story without judgment or surprise. Clearly, she had handled similar cases before. "Mrs. Miller, I recommend you set up an irrevocable trust. That way, you maintain full control over your assets while you're alive, but no one can legally pressure you into making decisions you don't want to. Furthermore, we can include specific clauses about the conditions under which your heirs can access the inheritance." "What kind of conditions?" "For example, that they demonstrate respectful behavior towards you for a minimum period of time, or that they contribute to your well-being without expecting immediate rewards. The options are numerous." I liked that idea. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. If they wanted to be my heirs, they would have to earn it by behaving like a real family. A week later, Jacob showed up unannounced, accompanied by a man he introduced as a friend who understands finance. He was actually a financial advisor he had brought to convince me to invest my money in products that, coincidentally, would generate commissions for him. "Mom, Ricardo here is a wealth expert. He's explaining how you could multiply your inheritance with smart investments." Ricardo had that professional salesman's smile and a binder full of colorful charts that supposedly proved how profitable his proposals were. But I was no longer the naive widow I had been 6 months ago. "Jacob, I appreciate your concern, but I already have my own financial advisor." "Who? Since when?" "Since I decided it was time to handle my affairs professionally." Jacob's face darkened. He wasn't used to his mother making independent decisions, let alone questioning his advice. Tiffany, who had been snooping around the library, approached with a worried expression. "Carol, you're not making important decisions without consulting us, are you? We're your family. You should trust us." "I do trust you," I told them with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "To be exactly who you've shown yourselves to be all these months." They left earlier than usual that afternoon, and I could see in their faces that something in the dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the malleable grandmother they could manage at will. I was a woman with resources, with professional advice, and with the determination not to be manipulated. That evening, as I ate dinner on my terrace watching the sunset over the Hudson Valley, I realized that for the first time in months, I didn't feel that tightness in my chest that I had come to consider normal, the constant anxiety of waiting for their approval, the fear of their rejections, the desperation to win back their affection. All of it had disappeared. It wasn't that I had stopped loving them. I was still their mother and grandmother. Those bonds weren't easily broken. But I had learned to love myself too, to value my own dignity above their acceptance. That night I slept deeply, without pills, lulled by the chirping of crickets in my garden. In my dreams, their scornful faces and slammed doors no longer appeared. I dreamed of lavender fields, of books to be read, of trips I could now afford to take, of a life that finally belonged completely to me. The moment I had been dreading arrived in the most treacherous way possible. It was an October Tuesday when I received a call that froze my blood. The voice on the other end was a woman who identified herself as the secretary of a luxury assisted living facility on the outskirts of the city. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller. We're calling to confirm your scheduled admission for this Friday. Your son, Mr. Jacob Miller, has already signed all the necessary paperwork and paid the initial deposit." I was speechless. The phone trembled in my hand as I processed what I had just heard. My own son had committed his mother to a facility without her consent, without even consulting her. "Excuse me," I managed to articulate, my voice shaking. "There must be some mistake. I haven't requested any admission. According to our records, ma'am, your son submitted a medical report indicating mild cognitive decline and the need for constant supervision. He also provided legal documentation establishing him as your legal guardian." Legal guardian. The words hammered in my head. Jacob had somehow managed to be appointed my guardian, which meant he had total control over my decisions, my money, my entire life. I hung up and immediately called Ms. Warren, my lawyer. Her secretary said she was in court, but that it was an emergency and she would track her down. While I waited, I felt the world collapsing around me again. But this time it was different. This time it wasn't just contempt or exclusion. It was a betrayal designed to destroy me completely. Isabel called me back an hour later, her voice grave and concerned. "Carol, I've just checked the court records. Your son filed a petition for guardianship last month. He used a falsified psychiatric report as evidence and testimonies from supposed neighbors who claimed to have witnessed erratic behavior. How is that possible? I have the medical certificate from Dr. Evans. The problem is the judge already ruled based on the evidence presented. Your son has temporary legal custody while the appeal is resolved, which could take months. In the meantime, he can make decisions about your living situation and manage your assets. My assets, my house, my money. Everything Louis had left me so I could have dignity in my final years was now in the hands of the son who had scorned me until he discovered I had something he wanted. Isabel, I need you to get here immediately. I'll pay whatever it takes, but I am not going to let them lock me away like I'm insane. I'm already on my way. But Carol, listen to me carefully. Do not open the door for anyone until I get there. If they show up with a court order for involuntary commitment, they can take you without any further process. I spent the next 3 hours as a prisoner in my own home. I locked all the doors, drew the curtains, and sat in the living room waiting for my lawyer to arrive. Every noise outside made me jump. Was it Jacob with the staff from the facility? Was it the police coming to execute a court order? At 5 in the afternoon, I heard cars approaching on the gravel driveway. I peeked discreetly through the window and saw something that broke my heart. It was Jacob, Tiffany, and all 3 children. But they weren't alone. They were accompanied by 2 men in dark suits who looked like court officials, and an older woman in a white uniform who was obviously a nurse. My own son had brought his children to witness their grandmother being forcibly committed. Or perhaps he thought my love for them would make me go voluntarily to spare them the trauma of a violent scene. They rang the doorbell insistently. Then they pounded on the door. Finally, I heard Jacob's voice shouting from the garden. "Mom, open the door. We know you're in there. Don't make this harder than it has to be. We just want to help you." "Help me?" The word sounded obscene coming from his lips. Tiffany joined the chorus. "Carol, think of the children. We don't want them to see you like this, behaving so irrationally." Irrational. Defending my own freedom was irrational, according to the woman who had spent months plotting how to strip me of my inheritance. From my window, I saw Claire, my beloved granddaughter, crying while hugging her younger brother. The children didn't understand what was happening, only that something terrible was going on and that their grandmother had suddenly turned bad. Just then, Isabel arrived in her car, accompanied by another man who also appeared to be a lawyer. They got out with determination and headed straight for Jacob and his entourage. "Mr. Miller, I am your mother's attorney. I have here a court order for a temporary stay of commitment while the case is reviewed." "What order?" "My mother needs medical attention," Jacob shouted, but his voice was less certain now. "Your mother has been examined by 3 independent psychiatrists in the last 48 hours. They all agree that she is of sound mind. Furthermore, we have discovered serious irregularities in the legal process that led to your appointment as guardian." Jacob's face went pale. Tiffany took a step back, as if she wanted to disappear. The facility staff exchanged confused glances. Isabel continued in a firm voice. "We have evidence that the psychiatric report submitted to the court was forged and that the supposed witness testimonies were paid for. This constitutes felony document fraud and procedural fraud." "That's ridiculous," Tiffany muttered, but her voice trembled. "Is it ridiculous that we have found the receipts for the payments you made to people to testify falsely about Mrs. Miller's mental state?" Is it ridiculous that we have recordings of your conversations planning how to gain control of her inheritance? Recordings. Isabel had been digging deeper than I had imagined. At that moment, I understood that my lawyer wasn't just competent. She had immediately seen the kind of people we were dealing with. Jacob looked at Tiffany in a panic. The children were still crying, not understanding why the adults were shouting and saying such ugly words. One of the facility officials approached Isabel. "Ma'am, if there are irregularities in the process, we cannot proceed with the admission. We will require clear legal documentation before we act." "There will be no admission," Isabel declared flatly. "My client is exercising her right to remain in her own home and to manage her own estate freely." At that moment, I opened the door and walked out into the garden. Everyone turned to look at me. I was no longer the trembling, pleading woman I had been for months. I was wearing my new blue suit, my head held high, my eyes dry. "Jacob," I said, in a voice I didn't recognize as my own, as firm and cold as his had been when he told me to look for a home. "I think we need to talk." The staff from the facility left after reviewing the documents Isabel presented. The children were still crying, confused by a situation their parents had created without thinking of the emotional consequences it would have on them. Tiffany tried to lead them to the car, but Claire resisted, clinging to my leg. "I don't want them to take Grandma. She's not crazy." My granddaughter cried through her tears, and every word was like a slap in the face to Jacob and Tiffany. "Claire, let's go. Grandma is confused," Tiffany murmured, avoiding my gaze. "I am not confused," I said with a calm that surprised even me. "I am perfectly lucid. Lucid enough to understand that my own son tried to make me believe I had lost my mind so he could steal everything I have." Isabel gently approached the children. "Kids, why don't you go play in the garden while the adults talk? There's a lovely swing set by the pool." The children reluctantly moved away, but their parents needed them gone for the conversation that was coming. Jacob's face was a wreck, like a man who has just seen all his plans crumble. "Mom, this is a misunderstanding. We just wanted to take care of you." "Take care of me?" I interrupted, and for the first time in my adult life, my voice was louder than his. "Were you taking care of me when you left me with pneumonia without coming to see me? Were you taking care of me when you forgot my birthday? Were you taking care of me when you excluded me from your own son's baptism?" "Mom, that's all in the past." "It is not in the past when it still hurts every single day," I shouted, startling everyone, including myself. For 69 years, I had been the woman who controlled her emotions, who swallowed insults, who turned the other cheek. Not anymore. Tiffany tried to intervene with her syrupy voice. "Carol, we know we've made mistakes, but we can fix this. We're a family." "A family," I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the word. Where was this family during 12 exclusions? Where was it when I went without so I could pay for your husband's college education? Where was it when I was widowed and had to learn to live alone? But Mom, that all changed when you got the inheritance? We wanted to get closer. You wanted to get closer to my money, Jacob. You still see me as an inconvenience to be managed." Isabel, who had been silently observing the family dynamic, pulled a folder from her briefcase. "Mr. Miller, your mother has a right to know everything we've discovered during our investigation." Jacob paled even further. "What investigation?" "The investigation I ordered when we suspected irregularities in the guardianship proceedings," Isabel replied, her voice professional but cold. "We have found records of phone conversations where you and your wife plan exactly how to gain control of your mother's estate." She took out a small recording device and pressed a button. Instantly, Jacob's voice filled the garden air. "Tiffany, we have to move fast. If we can get her declared incompetent, we can sell the Hudson Valley house and move the money into accounts we control. The old woman will never know what hit her." Tiffany's voice replied with crystal clarity. "What if she resists? She's more stubborn than she looks. That's why we need the fake psychiatric report. My friend Carlos owes me a favor and can get us a psychiatrist who will certify whatever we need." The silence that followed was deafening. Jacob and Tiffany looked at each other like two criminals caught in the act. I felt physically ill, listening to how they had planned my destruction with the coldness of a business transaction. "There's more," Isabel continued, changing the file. Another recording began to play. This time it was Tiffany on the phone with someone. We need witnesses who will testify that my mother-in-law is acting strangely. Do you know anyone who can help us? Obviously, they'll be compensated for their trouble. How much money are we talking about? $500 per statement. It's nothing considering what's at stake. I sat down on one of the garden benches because my legs were shaking. It wasn't just the betrayal that tore me apart, but the premeditation, the cold, calculated way they had planned to destroy my life. Claire came running from the swings. "Grandma, why are you crying? What did Mommy and Daddy do to you?" The question came from the mouth of a 10-year-old girl, but it held all the truth the adults had been avoiding. My grandchildren knew, with that childhood intuition that detects the lies of their elders, that their parents had hurt me. "Claire, come here," I said, drying my tears. "Grandma's okay. I'm just sad because sometimes the people we love hurt us without realizing it." But Jacob had completely lost his temper. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You spoiled us. You gave us everything we asked for without teaching us the value of hard work. Now you're trying to play the victim because we're finally asking you to contribute to the family." "Contribute?" I asked, standing up with a dignity I didn't know I possessed. "I have contributed my entire life. I raised you alone since you were 12. I worked cleaning offices for 20 years to pay for your education. I took care of your children when they were born. I cooked for you. I mended your clothes. I loaned you money you never paid back. That was your obligation as a mother. And respecting me was your obligation as a son." The words left my mouth like a final verdict. In that moment, something between us broke for good. But for the first time, it wasn't my heart that was shattering. Tiffany tried one last, desperate move. "Carol, think of the children. If we keep fighting, they're the ones who will suffer. Wouldn't you rather we be a united family?" I looked her straight in the eye. "The children are already suffering, Tiffany. They're suffering because their parents have taught them that money is more important than love, that greed justifies cruelty, that it's okay to hurt people if it gets you what you want." I walked towards the house with a steady step. At the doorway, I turned to say something I had been mentally rehearsing for weeks. "This house is mine. This money is mine. This life I have left to live is mine. You have chosen contempt and manipulation. I choose dignity and peace." "What does that mean?" Jacob asked, his voice trembling. "It means you are out of my will. It means you are not welcome in my home until you learn the meaning of respect. It means your children can visit me whenever they want. But you have lost that privilege." I closed the door softly, without slamming or shouting. For the first time in my life, I was the one who closed the door. 6 months after that day that changed my life forever, I wake up every morning in my house in the Hudson Valley with a feeling I had forgotten existed: peace. It's not the resignation of the defeated, nor the forced calm of someone who has given up the fight. It is the deep peace of someone who has finally found her place in the world. My morning routine has become a ritual of self-love. I eat breakfast on the terrace, watching the sunrise over the rolling hills. I read the newspaper without rushing. I water the plants in my garden, which I now know by name. Every gesture is a small celebration of my freedom. Every decision a reminder that my life belongs to me. Maria still comes 3 times a week, but she's no longer just my employee. She has become my friend, my confidant, and at times I feel she is the sister I never had. We cook together on Sundays, preparing traditional recipes I learned from my mother, which I now teach to someone who truly appreciates them. "Mrs. Miller," she says while we knead homemade bread, "you look 10 years younger since you cut those people out of your life." She's right. I look in the mirror and see a woman who has regained the sparkle in her eyes, who smiles naturally, who walks with her back straight because she no longer carries the weight of humiliation on her shoulders. My grandchildren come to visit me every other Saturday. Claire, Alex, and little Mikey arrive on the Metro North train from the city by themselves, like the independent children their parents have been forced to let them become. At first, they came with guilty faces, as if they were betraying their parents by loving me. "Grandma," Claire told me during her second visit, "Daddy says you're mean because you won't give us money for important things." "What important things, honey?" "I don't know. He says you could pay for our private school and the extra tutoring, but that you'd rather spend the money on silly things." I sat with her in the garden, under the cherry tree that had bloomed spectacularly that spring, and explained something I never thought I would have to say to an 11-year-old girl. Claire, love can't be bought with money. If someone only loves you when you give them things, that's not real love. I love you because you're you, not because I expect anything in return. Is that why Mommy and Daddy didn't love you anymore? Because you didn't have money? The question pierced my heart, but it also filled me with a strange sense of gratitude. My grandchildren were learning a lesson that had taken me 69 years to learn, that respect and affection cannot be bought, and whoever makes them conditional on money never truly felt them in the first place. No, honey, they loved me, but they got confused and thought money was more important than feelings. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and hurt the people we love. During these months, I have discovered passions I had buried under decades of family obligations. I've started painting with watercolors, something I always wanted to do but never had time for. My first paintings were clumsy, but every time the brush touches the paper, I feel a joy I haven't experienced since childhood. I have also started to travel. Small trips, nothing extravagant, but for me, each outing is an adventure. I've visited Newport, Mystic, and the Berkshires. I've eaten alone in nice restaurants, slept in hotels with beautiful views, and bought souvenirs for myself. Each trip is a declaration of independence, proof that I can take care of myself and enjoy my own company. Last month, Jacob tried to contact me through Isabel. He had sent a formal letter requesting a family reconciliation meeting and proposing conditions to restore harmony. The conditions, of course, included my financial contribution to the children's education and that I consider gifting them part of my inheritance now to avoid future family misunderstandings. I told Isabel to respond with an equally formal letter. Mrs. Miller is not interested in negotiating the terms of her dignity. The channels of communication will remain open when there is a genuine acknowledgement of the harm caused and a sincere apology that is not accompanied by financial requests. A reply never came. However, life has given me beautiful surprises in the form of new relationships. I've met other women my age in town who, like me, are rediscovering who they are beyond their roles as mothers and grandmothers. We meet on Thursdays at Helen's house, a 72-year-old widow who has the most beautiful garden I have ever seen. We play bridge, exchange recipes, and most importantly, we listen to each other without judgment. They understand my story because many have lived similar versions. Dorothy, 74, was stripped of her savings by a son with a gambling addiction. Patricia, 76, was put in a nursing home by her daughter-in-law until a niece rescued her. Susan, the youngest of our group at 65, was a victim of financial abuse by her husband for 30 years. We thought silent sacrifice was love. Susan told me one afternoon over chamomile tea. We were taught that good mothers gave everything of themselves until there was nothing left. And it turns out that disappearing isn't love, Dorothy added. It's cowardice disguised as virtue. They're right. For decades, I confused love with compliance, care with emotional self-harm. I believed that being a good mother meant accepting any treatment, forgiving any offense, giving without limits or conditions. Now I understand that true love requires mutual respect, and that teaching our children to value us is just as important as teaching them that we value them. One November afternoon, while walking through the local farmer's market buying ingredients for a dinner I was making just for myself, I came across an older woman who was crying quietly while choosing vegetables. She approached me and asked if I was the lady who inherited the big house, because she had heard I'd had trouble with family and wanted to ask for advice. I told her my story in brief, without dramatizing but without hiding the truth. She listened with eyes full of tears I immediately recognized. They were the same tears I had shed for months. "And are you happy now?" she asked when I finished. "I don't know if I'm happy," I answered honestly, "but I am free. And I've discovered that freedom is the first step toward any happiness worth having." That night, as I ate dinner alone in my dining room, lit by candles I had lit for no special reason other than my own pleasure, I reflected on the year that had changed my life. I had lost a son and a daughter-in-law, but I had gained self-respect. I had given up the illusion of a perfect family, but I had found the reality of an authentic life. On my nightstand, I keep a photo of my grandchildren from the last weekend we spent together. They are smiling genuinely, with that transparent joy of children who feel loved unconditionally. That photo reminds me why it's worth standing firm, because real love cannot be built on lies and manipulation. Sometimes, at night, before I fall asleep, I think about the woman I was a year ago, the Carol who cried alone in her Astoria apartment, who kept unopened gifts, who apologized for existing. I feel tenderness for her pain, for her confusion, but I don't miss her. This Carol, the one who lives in the Hudson Valley surrounded by beauty of her own choosing, who makes decisions without asking permission, who says no when something doesn't feel right, who loves from a place of strength and not weakness. This Carol is here to stay. It's never too late to reclaim your dignity, set boundaries, and remind yourself that your worth does not depend on anyone's conditional love. You don't beg for self-respect. You build it with every no you say to those who used you, and with every yes you give yourself to live in peace and freedom. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from those who broke you into pieces and begin to pick yourself up with your own hands. Do you know someone who has gone through something similar? Comment below and tell me about it. I'd love to read your story. And if this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll help this message reach those who need it most.